Gordon, I discussed with you previously, and you gave the go-ahead to do this. Let's talk about the Mosaic album, because this is an album I had no idea about up until recently. And I've been listening to this album that you did with Ricky Skaggs.
Yeah.
And I don't really have the words. I'm not a great, my verbiage is lacking. Let me put it that way a lot of times. But I was emotionally, I don't want to, this album hit me emotionally, some of these songs on here. So if you don't mind, we'll go down track by track of this album. But tell me a little bit about the genesis of this album. How did you hook up with Ricky Skaggs to do this album?
Well, I'd known Ricky for years, wouldn't run into him very much at all, but just knew him, mild acquaintance, I would say, over the years. I mean, he actually opened for the Statler Brothers on a tour that the Statlers did. The first time I ever saw Ricky live, it was in front of them. Gosh, I was probably in the 80s. But I was a huge fan of the Skaggs and Rice, Tony Rice record, just blew my mind. So I was a huge fan of his. And I remember my dad, back when I was playing on sessions for my dad and playing on early Reba McEntire stuff, he got Ricky to come in and do a duet with her. And as Ricky was, and I went to go listen because I was aware of this guy and I wanted to hear this. So I was in the studio when Ricky came in to do the vocal. And the song's called Small Two Bedroom Starter, I believe. Ricky, as he was leaving after working that day, my dad said, get a good look at that guy because he won't be available for this work much longer.
Oh, gosh.
And sure enough, he, became a huge deal in country and probably my favorite country artist in my lifetime, my favorite to go and see live and just kicking the band were always phenomenal. And back when Ray Flack was playing for him, I was a big fan of that. And then Ricky became the electric player in the band and they didn't lose a beat. Ricky's just a great, anything with strings on it, he can just tear it up. Right. So, but anyway, so I knew Ricky through the years. And at some point when I was writing and starting to get songs placed with different Nashville artists, just on the front of my heart, I always thought, man, if I could just get one song recorded by Ricky Skaggs, I would go, thank you, I'm good for here. And at some point, Lee Groich, who works for Ricky at the time and still does, called me and said, looking for songs for Ricky Skaggs, Bruce Hornsby record. You got anything? Well, there's always only one answer to that question. Oh, yeah. So I put together a CD of a song that I thought these guys might like to do. Well, I had met Hornsby at an ASCAP Awards dinner in L.A. recent up to this time. At that time, it was not too long before that. And I walked up to him, me and my wife said, it's not often you get to shake the hand of the person that for us as a couple, one of your songs is our song, Oh, wow. So we enjoyed meeting Bruce Hornsby at that event. So here it is, another year or two or whatever, how many years later, I'm pitching a song for this Skaggs Hornsby project, and Lee hands it to Hornsby first, who sees my name on it. And this is a bluegrass album with Hornsby on piano added to bluegrass. That's what the concept of this album is. He sees my name on it and goes, oh, this guy's pop, and throws the CD aside. So as Bugs Bunny would say, he don't know me very well, do he? Or whatever well, anyway, so I was like, well, heck. So at some point I said to Lee, could you get it to Ricky? He might know a little more about at least my family history or something and not dismiss me without listening to the CD.
Yeah.
Well, Ricky gets it, and it's this song that I wrote with Phil Madeira called Come On Out, which is using that gangster language, but talking to the soul of a person. Come out with your hands up, There's still time before you die. I mean, that'd be a great thing for a James Cagney movie, but it'd be a great thing for a preacher to say from the pulpit, come on out. I see you in there crawling around on your hands and knees, you're already on your knees, you know. Anyway, so Ricky hears it and he falls in love with it and he plays it for Bruce, who says, quote, "How did they know what we were looking for?"
Oh gosh.
So it just had to go the other way to get to on that record. And then I went and played on the CMT cross country show and took my dad's Dobro. And the way I got to play on it was Ricky said, he called me one day. And again, I haven't spent time with Ricky ever in the studio at this point, and was just so thrilled they were recording that song. And he called me one day and said, "Have you got your dad's Dobro?" Now, this is the one he played on Engine number 9, Roger Miller and
Crazy.
Tom T. Wall, Ballad of $40 and Week in the County Jail and Harper Valley PTA, which is the biggest of the stuff he did with that Dobro. Yeah. "Have you got your dad's Dobro?" And I said, "Yeah, I can go get it out of the Hall of Fame and bring it to you." "Oh, that's fun. That'd be great." And so I took it out to Ricky's studio and handed it to him and said, "Here it is." He goes, "Oh no, I want you to play it." Now, this is more nervous than being on stage with Garth, right? I'm sitting there playing a bluegrass guy on the other side of the glass. I'm playing Dobro for him. I'm thinking, you should be doing this. Anyway, so I played. I found out later that he wanted the same thing that was on my demo that I did. So anyway, that's how I started working with Ricky. And then a couple years after that, Lee Groich again calls me and says, "Got any songs for Ricky's next project?" And again, there's only one answer to that question: yes. So I put together what I thought would be songs of mine that could be persuaded to go bluegrass should he like the song. And then just on a wild, and I say, you know, this is no coincidence, or wouldn't call it a wild notion, because you'll figure it out in a second. I just thought, I'm getting ready. I'm flirting with, at the time, doing another Dogs of Peace record, that second record we were talking about doing. Just because I want Ricky to know where I'm at with my faith these days, I put these 3 songs that I've got set aside, thinking they might be for the Dogs of Peace thing, just so you'll know where I'm at these days. And then a couple of weeks go by, and I asked Lee, "Did you hear that CD?" He goes, "Yeah." He said, "Now those first 3 songs on there," he goes, "by the way," he said, "I love them." And he said, "In fact, my son Spencer, every day we get in the car, he goes, 'Dad, play You'll Find God. Play it every day they get in the car.'" He said, he goes, "I love it." But he goes, "That's not really what I think Ricky's looking for this next record. So if you don't mind, I'm going to burn a new CD and put the balance of the songs on that, give that to Ricky." And I said, "Yeah, thank you for even taking the time to do this." Then a couple of months go by, and I get a call from Lee, who said he heard the first 3 songs and he wants to do those first 3 songs. And so I said, "How's he going to do that?" He goes, "He's going to call you later." And then I get a call that day, "Ricky, son, I love them first 3 songs." I said, "Well, how are you going to do those bluegrass, Ricky?" He said, "I'm not. I want to do them just like your demos, and I'm going to need you to come help me produce the record." So that's how we started that record.
Wow, that's a cool story. So let's dig into the album, and again, a very emotional album. But you can see a journey throughout this album. You can see a progression, and it kind of reminds me a little bit of the Pilgrim's Progress in a way. Just from my perspective. But let's talk about the first track on this, Gordon. And I believe, let's just talk about the first one that I've got up here, "Can't Shake Jesus." Tell me about this song. What does this song mean to you? What's the genesis of creating this song? What are your thoughts behind it?
Okay, again, this is a song I wrote with Phil Madeira. We'd gotten together one morning to finish writing a song that we had started days or weeks earlier. So we happened to finish this other song by about 11 a.m. I mean, it didn't take us very long to finish. And I said, "Well, you want to call it a day, or would you like to go to lunch?" He said, "Why don't we go to lunch and come back and write another song, you know?" And I was like, okay. So kind of, it was hard for me to think about, starting another lap, having just come through and finished, crossing the tape And, oh yeah, let's go another one, so, but we came back after lunch and now I've got this MP3 player in my ear over here listening to, I know where I just keep ideas one after the other, little nuggets of guitar riffs, melodies I might hum and stuff like that. I just keep a stockpile of those and I'm rifling through these things as he's just sitting on the sofa in front of me, just talking, just conversation, talking. And as I'm listening in this ear, he's talking in this ear. And I'm going, there's another idea. There's another idea. I'm multitasking, listening to him. And at some point, he's talking about somebody he knows that got out of a marriage because this person's spouse was using religion kind of as a weapon against this person that he knows. And he said she ran away from all things Christianity because of this. And I'm still going idea after idea here. And I get to this idea in my ear, this riff, as he says, but ultimately she just couldn't shake Jesus. They happened at the same time in my head. So when you hear the intro to You Can't Shake Jesus, that's what was playing in my left ear as he said the phrase, You Can't Shake Jesus. Wow. And I looked at him and I said, I know what we're writing today now. So, and that's what started that song. And then I would hear Ricky say to even Grand Ole Opry audiences at some point where he talks a little more about what it means to him. And that, when you think about what they being, the ones that didn't get it at first did to him, tried to knock him off his message, obviously crucified him. Ultimately, whatever they tried to do to him to destroy him, they couldn't do it. And so they could not shake him. Mm-hmm. And then, but the song ultimately says, the singer, from our perspective, singing this song, there might have been a time in my life where I tried to escape this and dismiss all of this, but ultimately I couldn't shake Jesus. So it has a double meaning. You can't shake him. You could try to knock him off of his message and try to discredit or do whatever, abuse, mock and accuse, sell him out for 30 pieces. You can, test him and try him and try to deny him, but you can't shake him. He can't be shaken.
Yeah, and that song, I think as followers of Christ, I think we can all relate if we're honest. We've been through that, and we struggle with that at times, but we can't shake him, and right. That's a good thing.
And he's, what's good, the best thing about him is that you can take off running away from him. He will still pursue you, yeah. But not running you down so he can whip you. I mean, it's a gentle pursuit.
Absolutely. The next track that I've got in front of me is Make God First. And some of the lines that stood out to me is, my Lord, my God, so often my last choice, wait till it's worse before I thirst. I love those lyrics.
Well, how often do you wait till you're in trouble before then you need God, So, yeah. And I'll say this, that's sweet about the story of writing this song. I wrote this with Will and Langdon Reed. Will is the son of Harold Reed, the bass singer in the Statler Brothers. And Langdon is the son of Don Reed, the lead singer for the Statler Brothers. And those two guys were the only two actual brothers in that quartet. Those guys wrote some of the greatest songs that will ever be written for country music. And sadly, Harold's no longer with us, but Donnie's still with us. And my dad was fortunate to, like I said earlier, that he produced them, I think, 31 years. Mm. So the sons, the cousins, come over and we're doing music together for a while. And at one point it was just a trip, where they wanted to visit and do some writing. And so I'm sitting there with these guys, and Langdon has the titles written down on a notebook or something. And when he said, how about let's take a second and make God first, the first thing that hit me was, you are so your dad with that title, because that's how the Reed brothers from the Statler brothers, they thought, their minds, that's how the wheels spun in their heads when they were writing songs. So I was just so tickled that that's your dad. And so the three of us sat there and wrote. And at that point also, the Mosaic project was kind of, we had cracked the surface and it was underway. It would be a record that took us, I don't know, 4 or 5 months to do. But so I was able to say to those guys, can we channel this towards this thing with Ricky? And yeah, we love that song.
I guess the apple doesn't fall far from the tree.
That's good. Good thing in their case.
Yeah. The next track is Someday Soon. The melody or the harmonies on this song are just so tremendous. Someday Soon. And it seems like in this song, the pieces of the puzzle are starting to come together. Speak about Someday Soon.
I wrote this with Ben Cooper, who I had gone to Belmont in the year 2007, I believe it was. I was asked to be a judge for the finalists, 3 finalists in their songwriting competition for the year. And this guy named Ben Cooper was one of the finalists. So he actually won the competition. And then some months would go by when I would get a call from a friend of mine who's a publisher friend named Bobby Reimer. Hey, I've got somebody that you need to listen to and, listen to, see if you think it would be somebody you would want to write with and everything. And we met for coffee. He got out in the car. He popped in a CD. And as I'm listening, I'm going, wait, I know this sounds familiar. Well, anyway, I put it together that it was the guy that had won the contest at Belmont, Ben Cooper. So I get with Ben, and it was more of a mentor relationship at first for a while, until we just found ourselves writing songs together. And just like I would want to co-write with somebody, we kept writing songs together. So he and I ended up writing, I think it's 8 of the songs on that album. Like I said, it started off as a mentorship, and then it just became a collaboration. But yeah, he came in one day talking about being at church and seeing a guy. I believe he said he had the braces, on his arms, but was determined to get up and go through the communion and go to communion, Yeah. And that image was the thing that started this song, The last verse on there, the one that you mentioned a little bit about, I had a dream we were all in heaven. That is actually a dream I had. And I've had this dream more than once, by the way. I've dreamt about being at my grandmother's house at 2613 Huntington Lane in Shreveport. And I'm in the middle bedroom getting ready. And I think in one of the dreams, in the one that I'm talking about that I wrote this verse from, my Aunt Savannah was in the room. And she always was dressed so nice, like she was going to church, handbag over her arm. And she looked at me and said, "Are you ready?" And okay. And we walked out of that room and made the left into what is my grandmother's dining room at that house she lived in for 50 years. And instead of it being just that dining room, it was this massive room with this massive table and this huge feast on this table. Cool. And sitting in the middle, the first person I focused on was my cousin Randy, the one I mentioned earlier about giving me the book of guitar chords, because we had just lost him in recent years. So that, that was a dream that I had. And so that became the last verse of that song.
I love the lyric, and every labored step we take is one closer to our maker. Mm. And I know there will be a time it'll all become clear, or it'll all come clear. So
Right.
How more poignant can you be than that?
Right. Yeah, because we know that we look through that smoky glass now. So it's just at some point, though, it'll all be clear.
We'll see face to face. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Gordon, the next track is Instead, and do I hear George Beverly Shea in this song? Recording?
Yes. It was Ricky's idea for us to go over to where in Black Mountain, North Carolina, to where George Bev Shea, who was 101 years old at the time, and record him. So, and he called him Bev. And we went over to his house with some recording equipment, Skaggs, myself, and Lee Groich, with the gear in tow and a couple of acoustic guitars. And we got George to sing. We just pulled out the guitars and had him sing one verse of I'd Rather Have Jesus, which was a staple for when he would do the Billy Graham Crusades. And this big Canadian baritone voice came out singing that. And what you hear on that record is the first time Ricky and I are playing it, and he's singing, and we're tearing up as he's singing, because there's this 101-year-old man sitting there. Gosh. I remember getting my picture made with him, and I went and brought it home, looked at the picture of me and George Beverly Shea, and I sent it to somebody and captioned it Gospel Music 101, because he was 101 at the time. And then after we got him to sing a verse, Ricky said, Bev, can we ask you to do one more thing before we go? Would you speak the second verse? And so he just spoke the second verse, which is tucked into another part of the record. But I'll tell you what happened, going back to the thing that we had going into Instead. Ricky had wanted George to say, all rise, as if he's the bailiff in the courtroom and the judge is coming into the chambers, right? Or coming into the courtroom. And I remember the first time we hit record and cued George Beverly Shea to say, all rise, he said, all rise? Like, yeah, is that what you want? So the second time, though, he said what you hear on the record, very authoritative, We bring that stuff back to Nashville, and we're in the mastering phase. And we're sitting there with the mastering engineer, and he's using the cursor on the screen to drop all rise into. We tried it at first in a spot and thought, no, let's move it. So Ricky had a place that he wanted to move it to, which when we heard it, it was perfect. I would have to go and listen to it right now to tell you exactly where we had tried it first and it didn't work and where it wound up. But so, yeah, that's George Beverly Shea announcing to the people in the courtroom, all rise. And then the song starts.
Wow. That's a touching story. Amazing story.
To get to meet him, that was the first time, the only time I got to meet him. Ricky knew him. Yeah. But that was one of the special moments, of which there are so many. One of the ways Ricky and I described the Mosaic album at some point, because I saw him struggling when people would say, what is this album? Is it country? Is it gospel? Is it bluegrass? Is it pop? Is it all these different things? And he would, I don't know. And for a while there, and it was in a cave at Cumberland Caverns, not too far from here, that I saw somebody ask him that. And, we couldn't figure out how to answer that. And I said, here's how I think of this album. And it became how we both would answer this question to people. What is this album? And we would simply say that what began as an album we were working on, within a couple of weeks became an album that was working on us. Okay. Because we would walk into the studio every day and there would be something that would happen, something unique that would happen, that would make you laugh, make you cry. But regardless of which, it was the presence of God to the point of where we walked in thinking of this place as being like a portal, and what's going to happen today that's going to be that's going to knock us down, or knock us over. And it would be something every day that would happen, just the way things would fall into place, even where they dropped that "All Rise" on the record the first time, that got placed into that song, where it wound up. And just, I'll keep telling you stories the more we talk about it, but yeah, that's how we think of that album, the whole album.
Well, you can certainly sense God's hand, and not only in the crafting of the lyrics, but the music as well. And what kind of album is it? To me, it's a mixture of all of those things, all of those different genres of music, I guess, are kind of combined into one. So that's what I appreciate about it. You can hear a little bit of all of that stuff together at the same time.
I just remembered something else about Instead. It was about the third or fourth track he was going to put his voice on. I think it was the fourth or fifth, actually, maybe the fifth. And he went out to the mic, and now he's got like 4 songs under his belt, and he's kind of getting a little bit, I'm in a rhythm now. I'm getting stronger, and I'm ready to knock another song out and do this vocal. And he sings the first verse. And as he gets to the second verse, he's not singing. So I look at Brent, the engineer, Brent King, and he stops the machine. And then we hit the talk back and say, okay, we'll give you another run at it. And and I looked out after he stopped singing, and he's kind of fidgeting with the controls, mixing for his headphone levels or whatever. I thought, oh, he's just getting his stuff together out there. Well, then the second time it plays through, he gets that same spot, and we look out, and he is laying down on the ground, face down on the ground. And I'm looking at him, and Brent starts to stand up like something's wrong. And I just kind of put my hand on Brent's shoulder. And I said, I think I know what's happening right here, because it was happening to me when I was trying to sing this demo.
Yeah.
Because the message of this song is one of which I am bringing you the worst news in the history of mankind and the best news in the history of mankind in the same moment. Yeah. This guy is being put on a cross for me. That's the worst news ever. Yeah. But it's also the best news ever. And Ricky just hit the ground, and it took him a few minutes to get back up on his feet. He said, and he was saying, I'm sorry. Like, no. And you can hear his voice break when he starts the second verse. When I did waste my blessing, a squandered precious gift. You hear his voice break because he's still in the process of recovering from what singing this message is doing to him. So that's the last thing I was going to add about that song.
When I did waste my blessing, a squandered precious gift, upon the shepherd's shoulder, the lost lamb he did left. So I can see why anyone would have trouble getting through those lyrics. My goodness gracious. Yeah.
Yep. Because unfortunately, it's a true story.
Yeah. Absolutely. Yep. We've all wasted it. And thank God at some point those that are followers of Christ, at some point we have received it. And that's the good news. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Shepherd's Voice is next. Tell me about Shepherd's Voice.
Oh my gosh. The first person that ever told me about Jesus was my grandmother, Mama. Mama she would talk to me about him and talk to him. And I would be to the point where I would be looking around to find out where he was. I mean, in church, they would give me money to put in the plate. And he was so real to me because of her that I would say, no, I want to hand it to him, So she was the first person to talk to me and teach me about who Jesus is. And so it was just such a wonderful thing for me to have this piece of music. And again, it was another one I got with Ben Cooper about, so what do you think about this? And we sat down and wrote this thing, got the idea of what it was going to be about together. And I just wanted the lyrics to be something where I acknowledge her. And it was also at a time where, everything that's going into this record and the message that's being sung about has all been something that you have to be listening for. And so it just seemed to make a lot of sense on different levels that, there's so much noise in the world, so much distracting us these days, social media, the message that's permeating all of that right now. And they're not even masking it anymore, how much they're trying to eliminate God from everything. So in the midst of all that, how wonderful it is to have that line of communication open and still hearing from the shepherd, because it's not his will that we go off the cliff and perish. So, but you got to be listening for it. So that song is just saying, I'm listening for it. So that's really all it is. And I would just say one other sweet addendum to that is that, when it gets to the middle, Ricky, he, for the most part on these tracks for the album, he was just taking what we had laid down as our demos and then adding and embellishing with his great gifts and talents with stringed instruments and his singing. And on this one, he added a mandolin thing to what is actually an electric guitar solo that I did in the middle of the song. But his mandolin kind of just becomes the thing that my ears focus on in that little breakdown section. And I've always said, when I listen to him play in that song, it makes me want to know how to dance and makes me want to dance when I hear his mandolin in that thing. He's so great.
Well, your way of crafting lyrics, the one line here, the sound of teeth against forbidden fruit, that puts an entire new picture in my mind I've never had before. The sound of teeth against the forbidden fruit, and your ability to craft a lyric to take someone on a mental journey about what you're talking about is pretty incredible, Gordon. Pretty incredible.
I appreciate you saying that, and I will throw this in there because Lee, who sings with Point of Grace, saw Ricky at an event, and she cornered him and got right in his face and said, "What is it? What's going on with this Mosaic record?" He goes, "What do you mean?" She goes, "My family won't allow anything else to be played in our homes, in our cars or whatever for the last couple of months. What is going on this record?" And then she's trying to describe it. And I'll just tell you her words. She said, "There's nothing being said that hasn't been said before." And she said, "But it's like Shakespeare's saying it or something." I think that's what she told Ricky. And I just thought that it's, you were asking earlier about writing songs, you want to say it again. You have something to say. You want to say it in a way somebody wants to hear it. And so this whole album just became a gift. I've made this comment many times about songs on that record, that as a writer, songs, sometimes they come to you and through you to the listener. And many, if not all of the songs on this record, I realized at some point that they came to me and then stuck right here. And I realized, I was to be the hearer of this. And so I was the hearer of this first, But you're talking about how these songs were written and the way I craft lyrics. It's all part of that everything matters theory, that what I grew up on listening to, the people I listened to, how Roger Miller crafted lyrics. If you huff and puff and you finally save enough money, take your family on a trip across the sea. Take a tip before you take a trip. Let me tell you where to go. Go to England. That's the kind of stuff that catches your ear, Yeah. Just the way if you were just saying it. So all of that stuff that I was listening to when I was a youngster may have had something to do with the way this stuff poured out of me, and maybe why it feels a little like has its own, personality. And like Lee said, Point of Grace, it's not anything that hasn't been said before. But you know if something's being said in a unique way, and as a songwriter, you want to figure out how to not be cliche when you're writing a song. And is there a different way to say this? And you exhaust these things sometimes until you've got, wait, this is interesting. Now this is something. So the sound of teeth against forbidden fruit. I've never heard anybody sing that or say that or whatever, but that gets that picture across, doesn't it? That's a noise. It's like, there's forbidden fruit, but how do you make that have a sound? And we all know what it sounds like if you crunch into an apple, you know what that sounds like. So give that, life in a lyric so that there's no mistaking what you're talking about. And it has a sound because you're talking about trying to hear past that. So it has to work that way.
Well, there's certainly no mistake about that song. The next song is Picture. I love how the song kind of builds very quiet and gets pretty intense. Tell me about Picture.
Dear friend Mark Gersmel, keyboard player in Whiteheart for all the years I was in that group, we got together in 2006. So this ends up being, even though we didn't intend it to be, but it ends up being the song written for Mosaic that was written the earliest. Going back to 2006, we got together one day. And when Mark and I get together, first and foremost, it's to just spend time with each other and to reflect on our lives and how they would be so vastly different had I not roomed with him. He and I and Dan Huff shared an apartment together in like 1982, somewhere in there. So that's where I met him. And like I said, we went through Whiteheart together, and I said, let's write a song post Whiteheart, just let's see what we would come up with if we got together to write. So, the great thing about Mark, even when he speaks, he's just so eloquent in his just talking. He would always be the guy we want to hand the microphone to on stage to speak to the audience because he just did it so well. And so that song, the very opening line about at the foot of a soaring mountain, Mark, that's just like you and I going, today's Tuesday or whatever. It's just the way he speaks. And so we wrote a song and the idea that I presented to him to launch the thing was, I think I had gotten to a point where, and we've all said this, I've said it myself probably, but I don't say this anymore. And even in the movie Grand Canyon, isn't that the name of the movie where there's a perspective of different families and people all going to the Grand Canyon and wind up there at the same time to feel how small they are in the universe standing next to this canyon, And then I've heard people say, well, I feel just like a grain of sand, and I feel just like, when I stand next to the ocean, I'm tiny in the, and I just thought at one point, God doesn't see you that way. You are not the smallest thing in this picture. You could stand next to Everest, and to God, you are the biggest thing in that picture. And so that's where the song began was, let's look at it a little different now. We're not there are not so many of us people that God can't see each one of us. And there is certainly the Matterhorn and Everest and the Atlantic and whatever it is, the universe. What is the nearest thing to God's heart in all of that? And the biggest thing in that picture, and it's you and me. So that's why we wrote that song.
Well, definitely a very encouraging song. A Fire from the Sky is the next one. Now, there's this one about the prophet Elijah.
Yeah, and the prophets of it's about the prophets of Baal and I think Elijah, who Ricky and I, when we were recording this, we got to talking and laughing about how maybe he was just a little bit of a smart aleck, maybe
A little bit,
because he's sort of taunting because he knows what's going to happen and the results when he challenges them to build their altar and pray to your God, do everything that you're going to do to get your God to try to, and then I'll speak to my God and we'll see what happens. And then he, even after they build the altar, get a couple of bulls and set this whole thing up. It's like it would be the awesome, most wonderful killer reality show right now, if you think about it. He says, okay, yours didn't work. And there's even, we discussed the whole idea of, because Elijah is saying, you can call out to your God. Maybe he's traveling, maybe he's asleep. There's one translation somewhere where it says, maybe he's covering his feet.
Yeah.
Which we almost put in the song. And you know what that was about?
Oh, yeah.
If at the time, if you were covering your feet, you were going to the bathroom.
Yeah.
And so, he's saying this to them, maybe he's, how about that? Maybe he's, over there behind the bushes going to the bathroom or something. Yeah. So we just, got the biggest kick out of pondering what this guy's personality was. And then he says, okay, you had your chance. He says, it's my turn, and throw water on it. I mean, it's just the ultimate. He's going to show, I'm going to show you my God. And then that happens. And then at the point where Ricky reads that scripture before the outro happens and you hear the thunder.
Yeah.
As startling as that is, can you imagine being there when this actually happened and what that would have been like? So I'll throw this on there too. The Les Paul that I'm playing on the outro to that song it's a 1959 Les Paul standard that John Sebastian used on all the Love It Spoonful records.
Oh my gosh.
And
wow.
I'm playing it through a Marshall amplifier. And there are moments in the rubbing of notes playing together in that lead stuff at the end where it sounds like burning, like something is.
It does.
Yeah, it's amazing. And then Ricky, this is just one of the funny, humorous moments. He puts a bouzouki on there. What's that? Which is it's like a Middle Eastern, instrument where you have drone strings and play melodies over it. And, like there's Irish bouzoukis, Greek, different bouzoukis, but it's tuned. It's 4 courses of strings, and it's an interesting sound that is particular to that part of the world. And when he came in to listen to the part he played, this is Ricky Skaggs. He's sitting there listening, looking up at the speakers, and he goes, now there, he's listening to himself. He said, now there, that right there, that sounds Middle Eastern, Kentucky. And so we busted out laughing, but it just it tries to present in a musical track what it felt like to be there when lightning and lit that thing on fire and burned it up and burned it all up, the water, everything, the made a moat around it, and it burned all that up. So anyway, yeah, that was a fun song to do in the studio, to say the least.
Well, I love Ricky's reading the scripture there. That's amazing just to hear his voice read those verses of scripture. That's pretty powerful.
Yeah. Yeah. And he's visited the place where that actually took place, by the way. He called me from there. He called me and said, I'm standing in the spot where that whole thing went down. So he's serious about it.
Nice. A great song. The next song is I'm Awake Now. Very powerful to me, by, I believe, Ricky's daughter. Is that correct? I'm Awake Now.
yeah, Molly, he wanted Molly to come in. And the reason he wanted to do that was the demo that I had sent him, I sent him that song, was sung by my co-writer on that song, Melinda Schneider, who's from Australia. And she had brought me a song one day. She's a country singer, and she is phenomenal. She's just an unbelievable singer. But we were writing some songs together for one of her projects, and she presented me with this song idea called I'm Awake Now. But she wanted to write it about a girl that she knew who was in a breakup of a relationship, and I think had people trying to talk her into some sense. You need to get away from this person, on and on and on. And so when the girl snaps out of it, the message would be, okay, I'm awake now, or whatever. And again, because I was in the throes of, and not throes, but I'm, in the middle of doing the Mosaic project, I said, would you mind? So here I go once again. Would you mind if I turn this idea towards this project I'm doing with Ricky? Well, she's a huge Skaggs fan, so she was keen to do it. And so we just thought, I said, what if it's what everybody's gone to the funeral. The only person not speaking is the one in the box. What if they spoke? What would they say? And that's what the whole song is. They would be telling you, because every once in a while you hear a preacher say, oh, they don't want to come back. You would like for them to come back, but where they are right now, they don't want to come back. And if they could say to you that, and so that's what our song is. It's, them saying, for those of you who think I'm sleeping as you stand beside the bed, who may be weeping, don't look for me among the dead. I'm awake now. I'm awake now. And so that's what that whole song is about. And so rather than recut the track and Ricky have another vocal, to learn, he just thought, let me get my daughter on there. And what a sweetheart.
Voice. Amazing voice.
My God. Well, there are those few singers that you hear and think, reckon that's what the angel sounds like, because she just has that sound about her. One reason is just, I think, because of her personality and her spirit and her soul. Everything is all coming through her voice. And I did some background vocals with her on another song on the record, My Cup Runneth Over. That was just a joy for me to get to try to blend with her. And but anyway, yeah, she came in and just, that was what she did on that song was just too beautiful for words.
Well, that is a special song. The next song is My Cup Runneth Over. Now, did I read in the side notes of this song, or however they're listed, that Peter Frampton played on this one? Is that correct?
Yes, he did. He was out in L.A. at the time when we invited him to come play on the record. I was working with him, doing a lot of stuff with him at the time, and I said, Ricky, what would you think about, let's get our buddy, my friend Peter to come play on this? And Peter was immediately, yes, and flew in, came straight to the studio from the airport. And I had my father's 1961 ES 335, the one he used on the Orbison record and Elvis and Tammy Wynette, all those songs I mentioned earlier, and a little Tweed Deluxe amp ready for him to plug into and play. And I remember Ricky sitting across the control room, and Peter always stands in the studio when he plays electric guitar. He'll sit to play acoustic, but he plays electric standing up. So I knew to bring a strap, and I had that ready for him. We played him the song from the start to finish once, and then said, as he was listening, here's where you come in, play all the way to the end. So he listened to it once, and then I put the guitar on him. He's standing there getting the sound. He looks at me, he goes, where's the volume on the amp? And I said, it's in the middle of the 3. He said, as it should be. He had used that amp on the Fingerprints album, so he knew that amp. So he goes, what key is it in? I said, B. And he looks at the engineer. He goes, okay, go, like that. So it starts, and I said, here's your cue, and you're coming in right here. And he played this solo all the way to the end of the song, and I'm looking at him, but I'm looking at Ricky looking at him and trying to imagine being Ricky hearing this for the first time, because I've stood on stage with this guy at this point many times and just floors me every time. What he played was so unbelievably great without anything running off the rails ever. And he'd only heard the song once. And I looked at him and I said, just because we don't want it to be over, would you do another one? Sure. So we did that to him. He did a total of 4 solos, each one completely different than the others. And each one could have been it. But then we, had the luxury at that point of going and putting our favorite parts for each one.
Yeah. And
so that's him playing on that song. And, the thing is that guy had just lost 16 guitars in the Nashville flood.
Oh,
when he showed up to do that. Wow. It was on mine and Ricky's heart to just put this music in front of our friend, and get him to come play if he would agree to do it, which he did immediately. But now it's just like, we just want him to come hear this music. And we want to hear him play on this music, obviously. But we get in the car after doing the session for My Cup Runneth Over. And I'm sitting there trying to think of how to thank him. Before I could speak, he looks at me and he says, you don't know how much I needed this. I said, really? What? He said, it was like water to my dry ground. And I just thought, how sweet and how generous of him, because he wouldn't let Ricky pay him to do it. He said, give the money to the flood victims.
Yeah.
And the song is called My Cup Runneth Over. And he's telling me that it was like water to his dry ground. So this is one of those things where I'll always look at it and just go, this was meant to be exactly like this.
Wow. Amazing story. Amazing song. Amazing playing by Peter Frampton on that song as well. The next song, Gordon, is You'll Find God. And I have to admit, when I first heard this song, I guess the piano opening, I had a sense of Close to You by the Carpenters, and in combination with Daydream Believer by the Monkees, just with the opening there. 2 great songs in my book, but tell me about that song.
This is with the piano, right?
Yeah.
Toggling back and forth. Yeah. That was another one with Ben Cooper, as was My Cup Runneth Over, by the way. But yeah, Ben came in with that piano riff one day, and we had discussed I think it was just, we were in a devotional. One of our devotionals around that time was the story about, Jesus in the boat asleep. And I think one of the things that it hit me in a different way this time, or whoever was given the devotional or the instruction at this time, was how they woke him up, and he wasn't upset that they woke him up and he was asleep. It probably hurt his feelings that they woke him up in a panic, because I think his reaction, if you go back and look at it again, might have been one of more of, don't you guys know who I am by now, that you're still reacting like this? Yeah. So, but anyway, just sometimes writing songs can be visiting, sharing stuff of life, and then that's what surfaces, when the little piece of music shows up, and what can we write about today? And that's what brought about pursuing that as a song. And that ended up being the last song on the record that Skaggs put his vocal on, because he was intimidated by that high note, the wind always to get to rocking. You're the lightning rod. Don't forget that they're in the back of your boat. Fast asleep. On the demo, I sing, you'll find God. It's above his range now. So he was like, I'm not sure I'm going to be able to pull that off. So we kept putting it off until it was the last song on the record. And then in the studio, get ready. He says, well, what are we going to do? I said, why don't you sing, there in the back of the boat, fast asleep, you'll find God. So he just sings that. I stay above him, God. So it worked out to where, and you know that's the one song on the record that when he played it for his manager, Charlotte, she called me for the first time. She called me and said, I'm in my car crying listening to this song.
Yeah.
So, you know, and I'm like, and Ricky, you almost didn't put it on the record, you know, but it just worked out. And it gets to me when I'll tell you, that's another one of those things where I've decided in recent, like the several months to a year or so now, to start singing that one from the record when I go and do little performances. Boy, when I get down to the end, to the who is he, that the wind and the sea listen and obey. And if these things know he is king, then why are you afraid?
Yeah.
You know, and I think that hits me so much because there's so much going on around us, people we know and love, and somebody's experiencing this. There's so many things that are on their face, very frightening for us. But then ask yourself that, you know, in light of this, why are you afraid? And I ask myself, why am I afraid? You know, so I hear him saying that to me, and that's a moving part of that song to me.
Well, I love that picture image of don't forget to search in the back of your boat, fast asleep, you'll find God. And I just picture Jesus in that boat with tumultuous waves around him, and he's fast asleep. So we need to look in the back of the boat sometimes.
Yeah, that's right.
A Work of Love. Tell me about that song.
Again, with Ben Cooper, and started on piano because he's a keyboard player. And I think we just thought that day to write something just for our own satisfaction, that if we sang it, closed our eyes, we could picture somebody saying, turn now in your hymnals to page number, you know, that there would be something in this record, on this project, that would sound like a hymn. It still retains I think the unique personality and, you know, the direction of the record, but it sounds the most hymn-like to me on the record. So that's the simple explanation of the pursuit of writing that song. Hallelujah, that's a work of love. So we just wanted to write a hymn. We wanted to write a hymn for him. That's it.
It's a pretty good goal. The next song, Gordon, is Return to Sender. And I love the line in this song, return to sender on my stone. Right with chisel when I'm gone, return to sender on my stone. I've never thought of that before, but that's what a cool lyric. Tell me about Return to Sender.
Well, I wrote this one by my lonesome, but it came out of the Nashville Convention and Visitors Corporation, or Bureau here in Nashville, would ask me, Wayne, Tommy, over the years to go and play songwriter style performances for people they would put us in front of that they might be persuading, trying to get to bring their convention business to Nashville. I've been placed in a room with 3 people from, Kansas City who they're trying to get to book a convention for the year 2032. Play a few songs, tell a few stories, basically wanting them to have a Nashville experience, right? Yeah. So through the years, they've utilized our services to help them do that. Well, we were doing one in Washington, D.C., and then on this particular one, it was just me and Tommy Sims were performing. And as we're waiting to go out and play at this breakfast meeting with an audience. Tommy just, we were just talking, and he says, GK, he said, did your dad play on Elvis Return to Sender? And I said, no. I said, he played on Good Luck Charm, and he played on the Kissin' Cousins soundtrack. And no, he goes, so he didn't play on Return to Sender? And I said, no, but I want that on my tombstone. Ha ha. So just, again, if we're talking about songwriters, we talk to each other like this all the time, and then make a mental note. Wait a minute. I got home days later and went, you know what? I think I do want that on my tombstone. So, basically, if you look at the lyric of that song, it's an epitaph for somebody, myself or whoever would. And it's, there's the 4 verses. There's no chorus. It's just 4 verses. And Ricky, I had taken him the lyric, and I said, hey, Ricky, I said, I think this needs to be the last song on the record. And he looked at the lyric. He goes, he said, I think you're right. He said, I love this. I said, why don't you, put some music to it? I gave him the lyric. And a couple of weeks later, he brought the lyric back to me and said, son, ain't nothing falling out of the sky. He said, you just finished this. And so I did finish it. And he put it was the last song on the record. And, but yeah, that's all it was, a moment of, I made a joke, having a conversation with a friend who, hey, wait a second. I think there's something to that. I mean, and again, songwriters, somebody's, what is songwriting like? And to me, it's always, if you're a songwriter, you're always writing songs. If you're a songwriter, somebody gives you a subject, you should be able to write a song about it, no matter what it is. But where do the the ideas come from? And it's, in that particular case, it was from somebody asking me, I mean, if he had known that my dad played on Good Luck Charm, and if he had known that, then I wouldn't have written this song. Yeah. Because he asked about the wrong title, that it wound up being something. I went, hey, wait a second, So, but anyway, that's what that one was.
Well, an amazing picture image that you created there, and I'm so appreciative of that, because I've got something new to think about. And again, your song lyrics are taking me on journeys, and I've told you that I love that. I love to hear a beautiful song, and then in my mind I'm somewhere else. I'm in that song. So thank you for that. Yeah. The
only song we didn't talk about is the title cut. That's the first song on the record, right? Mosaic.
Yeah, please tell me. Yeah, absolutely. Mosaic.
Yeah, I just realized that it's the title cut for the album. And this song came about because of a poem that was written by a high school, actually grade school into high school, friend of mine named Chris Bonds, who when I changed schools in the middle of my 3rd grade year, there was this boy that was in my grade named Chris Bonds, who was in a wheelchair. And I found out that he had muscular dystrophy. But at the time when I was going to school with him in those days, he was, even from his chair, shooting baskets on the playground and was able to do a lot of things upper body wise. But through the years till we were a senior in high school, I saw that continue to diminish to the point of where he had the joystick to move his chair around, and writing became a thing where I thought, I'm even seeing it, a little bit of a thing for him to write now. But this guy was the sweetest human being I've ever met. Never saw him frown, and though he probably did, but I never saw it. Had the epitome of teaching even us grade school knucklehead boys running around Christ-like images from those early years. I even, and I say this because I've gone and given the award they give in his name to the football player at Brentwood Academy who does the most with his abilities, who just maybe has overcome some obstacles, but does the most with his abilities. So it's not the Heisman winner. It's the guy that, man, I can't believe you accomplished that in view of your circumstances. So it was that kind of an award, and I go and give it from time to time still because I want the parents and the players who are there to, when somebody receives this, to know who we're talking about, and it's just not a name on a plaque or something. But one of the things I do at these events also is to read the poem that his mom found in his room and gave me a copy of after he had gone, and because he lived to be 28 years old. And then I was at his funeral of one of the pallbearers. She said, "Would you like a copy of that poem?" I was like, "Oh yeah." So I kept that poem, thought about it over, sometimes I would think about maybe putting it to music. And then I thought, well, I don't really have a piece about that because I can't ask Chris if that's okay. And then I think when I read it, I go, that's just those are his words, should just stand as that. So, but the poem has, lines in it like, I don't know how to say it, but somehow it seems to me that maybe we are stationed where God wants us to be, that the little place I'm filling is the reason for my birth. And just to do the work I do, he sent me here to earth. And then kind of in the body of the poem, it gets to the point where you realize that he struggles probably. And when I read some of the lines about, a struggle, plod along a struggle and a hope when day is through, that I'm really necessary to the things God wants to do. I see this guy sitting in his chair on the sidelines at every single football game we played for 4 straight years until we graduated. But the first time we won a state championship, they gave him the game ball.
Cool.
Anyway, but I see him sitting over there at every basketball game. He would sit there in the rain with the parka, he was at every game. And I'm thinking, I know he would love to be out there with us. His dad played at Ole Miss, okay. So I just knew it. But I come to the conclusion, he says, when the envying is stilled, that the post to which God sent me is the post he wanted filled.
Oh, wow.
And he says, and the last thing is, so there isn't any service I can give which I should scorn, for it may be the very reason God allowed me to be born. But it just kind of crushes me when I read that and think about that. So I thought, instead of putting music to his poem, Mosaic, the song Mosaic that's me putting him to music. So, and you think about the lyric, carve my name upon a tree, knife into the bark, trying to make a mark so they remember me. And that wasn't Chris. He wasn't trying to be remembered and all that stuff. But that's all of us. I think about that's more just typical of humanity. I want to leave my mark somewhere. You hear people talk about that. Wanting to matter to someone, maybe be the reason why, or be the apple of an eye before my life is done. And all I'm saying is I'm in a place where all I'm praying is I see my face in your mosaic, and I am a piece in the deal, and this is real. So that was me just, putting, and then Ben and I wrote the music for that again, and we started it off with him on a piano one day. I think I'm pretty sure that's how we started it. But I just wanted to do the lyric basically for Chris Bonds. Mm. This is his poem, me speaking it in another language, if you will, just the way so it would fit a song. And that's where that song came from.
Well, Gordon, that sums up the album perfectly with that title song there. And it's so cool to hear the story behind the lyrics. And that's why I wanted to ask you about these individual songs. they're emotional to me, and I can place, life markers in these songs that you wrote. But it's also very important to understand where the foundations of these songs and what was in your mind and what experiences did you have when you wrote these songs. So it's much more impressive. It's much more deep to me to understand where they came from. So thank you so much for going over each individual song on that album.
Can I say one last thing?
Please.
My dad, he was so excited about this record when it came out, and we had him come and play those Dobro notes you hear in Work of Love. Ba-da-da-dum-bum. In the last verse, he just plays his Dobro, what he would play, and Ricky and I laughed and said, basically, he said, we got your dad to come out and play the part of your dad and just awesome. Play. We wanted him on A Work of Love and on the record somewhere. So he puts that on there. But when the record came out, my dad was so in love with the record that he gave a copy to Fred Foster, who produced Pretty Woman.
Oh, wow.
He produced Jolene, Dolly Parton. I mean, he was a Monument Records guy and produced a lot of iconic records back in the early days, and was going to Bible study with my dad at the time that the Mosaic record came out. So Dad gave Fred Foster a copy of the record for Christmas. And Fred called me, and he had a very distinct way of speaking, very slow and deliberate. But it was, anytime you got on the phone with Fred, it would always start off with, "Your dad gave me a copy." So, I mean, that's how his cadence was. But he was telling me two things I'll never forget. First of all, for the guy that produced Pretty Woman to tell me that the Mosaic album is the greatest album to ever come out of Nashville.
Oh, wow.
Meant the world to me. And I say the world because that's where comments like that belong. But that meant a lot to me that he said that. But then he said something that meant something else to me. This is not the world. This is something else. He said, "My son-in-law, he hates music." I said, "He hates music?" He said, "Yes, he hates music." He said he hasn't listened to 3 consecutive songs his entire life. He hates music. And I'm laughing, He said, "But I gave him a copy of Mosaic." And I said, "Fred, how old is he?" He said, "Well, he'd be about 60 now." I said, "Okay." He said, "I gave him a copy of Mosaic." I said, "You need to listen to this record. It's a great record." He said, so the guy gets in a car to go on a trip several hours away and calls him when he gets there. He said, "Fred, you're right." He said, "This is a great record." He said, I before I even listened through the first time, I had already hit the repeat button on my CD player so that it would just spin again.
Yeah.
And he said, "I listened to it the entire drive." He said, "I felt like Jesus was sitting next to me in the car, talking to me the whole way." He said, "I'm never taking that CD out of my car because I want him with me everywhere I go." Goodness. And so that's the kind of things that we've heard from people about this record. Ricky had a kid approach him after a show in Seattle about that record. And Ricky thought he wanted to, whatever, sign something, whatever. He said, he turned around to speak to the guy, and this young guy said, "Can I just say thank you for the Mosaic record?" "Oh," he said, "Oh, you like that record?" And the kid said, "Yeah." He said, "I got saved listening to it."
Listening to the album? Is that what you said?
Listening to the record, yeah.
Oh, my gosh.
Yeah, so, and I said to Ricky, when he told me that, I said, when we started that record, there was no great reason in the world, business-wise or record company-wise or marketing plan and budget and all that stuff. There was, other than, we just felt compelled to do it. And I said, "But let me ask you this." And we always have heard for years and years and years that what Jesus did on the cross, he would have done it if it was just for just you. I said, would we go to the studio with no budget and no marketing plan and so forth. 5 months, all the blood, sweat, and tears that you put into writing and recording songs and getting everything sounding just so. And would we do all that for 4 or 5 months for one kid in Seattle? That's the question that we need to be asking ourselves. And so this whole album is the most powerful project I've ever been a part of. And not only just because of when I listen to it and what it does, but it causes me to think about things like what I just said about the kid in Seattle. You have to sort of hold everything that you do to this standard that he has presented us with. So it's in the music that we do, and the way we live our lives, the way we speak to and treat each other, treat each other. It's everything. It's everything. So this happens to just be a record that captured a season in our lives in which, maybe for the most part, God works in mysterious ways. But on this particular season of life, when we made this record, it was a season of life where God was making himself obvious to us every single day for the time we were making this record. And there was no getting away from that. It just was. Well,
Gordon, this album is definitely a blessing. And for those that are listening or watching this interview, go and purchase the album. Click on the link below the video, and you're going to be blessed. My gosh, tremendous stories behind each and every one of these songs. And I'm not an eloquent speaker. It's obvious, and I don't have the words to describe this album. All I can say is go purchase the album and listen for yourself. But, man, thank you so much for going down each and every song. It's just, it's a great album, and I don't have words for it. So
it's good for me to do it. It's good for me to do it too.